Thank you for joining us in large numbers. I think no conversation today in any drawing room, seminar room, corporate boardroom is without a reference to social media, without a reference to fake news, without reference to manufacturing of truth, without reference to how democracies are being undermined at the largest level, democracies are being undermined by fake news, how reputations are being destroyed, how brands are being destroyed. So whichever space that you go, you have this idea of fake news. What we'll try and do today is try and limit this to what concerns all of us today, and is top of our minds is the political space. And what I want to start off by doing is to say that if you look at this panel, I think it represents what Bangalore and Bangalore Literature Festival is all about. It's trying to raise the level of discourse in society by ensuring that we are able to get all kinds of voices relevant to a conversation in place, so we can have a civil debate about it. And this is important because any democracy is only as good as its discourse. If you're in a democracy and your discourse is destroyed, and we are seeing the destruction of discourse happening not just in India but around the world, then the ability for us to make wise democratic decisions comes into question, right? So elevation of the discourse, ensuring that we can have a wonderfully civil conversation on an extremely hot topic is going to be my objective. And I told the panelists that I'm only going to do two things. I'm going to restrict you guys to 3 minutes because otherwise nasty things will happen to you on the panel. And we're also going to try and get you as the audience to participate as much as possible. So we'll keep our conversation short. They're not going to get sound bites, they're going to get sound nibbles. And we'll have to bear with it, right? Unfortunately, we have only about 37 minutes of time. I'll start by asking Naresh. Okay, and I'm going to ask the panelists to just give us their sense of what fake news is, right? We've got to understand what this thing is before we sort of deconstruct this and disagree over it, right? So Naresh, do you want to start quickly about what do you think fake news is?
Sure. So when I was in journalism training program, one of our teachers was trying to impress upon us the notion of a community standard in the kind of vocabulary we could use. And he told us the story of a judge in the US who was asked to define the difference between erotica and pornography. And the judge is supposed to have said, "I'll know it when I see it." The problem with fake news is when we see it, we don't know it. In these polarized times, the label of fake news has come sometimes to be applied wrongly, I think. For instance, to cases when reporters get a detail wrong, sometimes a crucial detail wrong. But these errors aren't motivated by malice. This is misinformation, and credible organizations make errors that they're embarrassed by. I am occasionally. And immediately issue clarifications. I think the label of fake news should really be applied to disinformation, to concerted campaigns by people who believe in patently untruths and who are trying to propagate them. This, I think, for instance, would apply to the time just after demonetization, when some TV journalists insisted that the new 2,000 rupee notes were fitted with nano GPS microchips that would allow the government to detect stacks of black money from satellites in outer space. It's this kind of alt reality, I think, which is a figment of somebody's imagination, which is the problem we need to tackle.
Thanks, Naresh. So can I go to Pratik? Pratik, I'm coming to you because you use the word alt, and you do alt news. So what would you say, because your entire business is on the foundation of spiking fake news, right? So what would you say is fake news? What are you spiking?
So there is misinformation in mainstream media, but what we are primarily looking at is misinformation on social media. That is where there's no accountability whatsoever. Even if somebody says that there's a GPS chip in a 2,000 rupee note, there is, who's running the organization, there's some sense of accountability. But what we are looking at is, for example, just the other day there was Amritsar train tragedy, and somebody put out a message that the name of the driver is Imtiaz Ali, and that message went viral, and the reason was very obvious, to give it a communal color and there's a concerted campaign against minorities using misinformation so that they can be shown that they are the villains of the society. So that is the sort of misinformation that we look at. But But the broader issue is that of excess of information. Fake news. The thing is that in the past 2 years, India as a country, we are using about 10 times the amount of internet data that we were from 2016 to 2018, and many rural parts of India now have access to internet. But for example, in Sri Lanka, etc., where there was Facebook Zero, for them, internet was Facebook Zero. They did not know a world outside Facebook Zero. That was internet for them. In India, that has become WhatsApp or any other app that you're using. So there is no education as to, let's say if you get something on WhatsApp, how do you figure out whether this information is true or not? And that is happening day in and day out. And for people across all age groups, from kids as young as 10, 12 years have WhatsApp, and people as old as 60, 70 years who have never actually used internet during their lifetime. Many people have not. And they have access to WhatsApp. And they do not know how to pursue this information. So when we first started Alt News, that was the whole point, as to help people pursue information that, this is how, so every story that we write on Alt News, we always say, this is how we found the conclusion. That is, either you find how to find a false image or a false video. We give the entire history, and what we are trying to do is essentially, teaching people how to pursue information.
Chitra, can I bring you in? See, you've covered the newspaper media, old media, and you're also in your new avatar on this. Do you think this business of fake news is media-centric? Is it something to do with the media, or is it to do with people? Is it that the people want to propagate certain things and the media is just an instrument? Or is it something so media-centric that the media is the problem?
I will answer that. I'm just mortified with long speeches. I just have very small things to say. I don't believe, for me, fake news is an oxymoron. There is right news and there is wrong news. And occasionally people make mistakes and they go back and correct it. But to say that, people who generate fake news are not journalists, as far as I'm concerned. They are people who want to create trouble, and that's something I'll talk about later, because I've also been a victim of that. Not a victim, I've called out people. And this thing about, children are consuming, young people are consuming information younger and younger, simply because what's available, you said the internet and all that. So for me, I don't believe there's anything called fake news. I actually believe there's good journalism and bad journalism. Yes, and then the news that is called fake news is put out by people, as you said, who want to create doubt or create misconceptions with a motive.
So you're saying that you're absolving journalists of fake news?
No, I'm not. I'm saying there are good journalists and there's good news, and there are good journalists and there are bad journalists. And you can decide who's good and who's bad. But fake is something very different. I mean, you and I can go and report an incident in different ways. We may perceive it differently. But if we manufacture the event, that's what is fake. To me, that's not journalism.
Srini? Truth or hype?
So I actually think that, with any problem, you can only tackle it once you identify it. And you have to name it and shame it. So for me, the biggest threat of fake news is not so much of the kind that is lurking in the dark corners of the internet. But it is very much to do with the context that we're in today. And that is to do with this culture of divisive falsehoods, which are spread by high political functionaries, as well as fake government propaganda, which is both either outright false information or misleading cherry-picked data, which to me constitutes the biggest threat to democracy. And if you are going to frame it in those terms, which is how I would frame it, then the biggest culprit as we speak at the moment is the ruling party. Is the ruling party, is the BJP, is the government, is the right-wing ecosystem, and the media cronies who amplify these falsehoods. And of course, the tidal wave of abuse that you get for pushing back against it. Now, these institutions, these individuals, have succeeded in mainstreaming some of the most dangerous, divisive falsehoods that have largely been confined to the fringe so far. For example, this oft-repeated myth of love jihad, this constant amplifying and scaremongering about cow protection, this constant sense of creating a sense of majoritarian victimhood about how the minorities are taking over, about demographic shifts, of conversions, and so on and so forth. Right? When I say that they are the biggest problem right now, the ruling establishment, I say that, you know, responsibly, because I know immediately people will go, oh, what about the Congress? They did this and they did that. And it's absolutely true that the Congress, in its desperate attempt to be a sort of mini BJP, is trying to outdo the BJP in some of its worst impulses. But it would be a false equivalence to say that there is a kind of a parity between the two. Unfortunately, it appears that right now, this culture of falsehoods, particularly divisive falsehood and of propaganda, is encoded into the architecture, into the DNA of the current BJP. Consider for a moment Amit Shah, who's telling a group of his party workers or social media workers, where he's talking about an example of a worker who circulated a viral WhatsApp about Akhilesh Yadav slapping his father during the Uttar Pradesh elections, which Amit Shah said was a false message, but it went viral. And he's admonishing this crowd by saying, don't do it, but with a very nudge, wink, wink manner. So the crowd gets it. They're all laughing as he's saying, don't do it. They're all laughing. And then he anyway gives the game away when he goes further and he says that, look, we are a political party that can make any kind of news viral. Real, fake, whatever it is, that's the strength we have.
Srini, I'll have to do what you guys do to the rest of us.
Can I just?
No.
Oh, I can't? Okay.
No, I'm just keeping the time on the first one to be fair.
All right.
The only objection I have to what you said is that you seem to think that the Indian political system is bipolar. There's BJP and there's Congress. Hey, there are a lot of us who are not BJP and Congress, so blame us too, right? So
no, okay. So
but you can do that in the next round.
Okay, that's not fair. You can't sandbag me with the question and not let me respond.
Okay, quickly.
Look, you can turn around and find fault with every single institution in society, but as I said, as I come back to it, as a journalist and as a citizen, my job is to identify the biggest source of a problem, the biggest threat, and that is when power speaks in falsehoods. That's a problem in India. That's a problem in America, and unless we name it and call it out, we can keep going around in circles, we're not going to get anywhere.
Let me bring Francois in. Francois, do you agree with the idea that first of all, that the definition of fake news as these guys have done it, and second, do you think that, do you agree with Srini's characterization that it's especially bad when the ruling party does it?
Okay, I find the fake news very strong a word because actually journalists have strong opinions, so they pick up stories which fit into these opinions. And the fault is that they don't, verify, they don't substantiate them. I want to give a quick example. When the BJP, I'm a very lone guy here because I'm a defender of the Hindus, so I'm in minority here. But when the BJP came to power, I'm a Catholic Frenchman, by the way, not a Hindu.
I'll defend Catholicism, don't worry.
Okay, so I worked for a Catholic paper called Le Figaro in Paris for 10 years. So there was, when the BJP came back to power in 2000, there were nuns which were raped in a place called Jabua. I don't know how many of you remember Jabua. 4 nuns were raped by Hindu militants. That's what reported in the media. So my paper, which is Catholic paper, sent me to Madhya Pradesh, to Indore, and I met the nuns and I met the bishop, and even the bishop, said, no, it's not true, they were raped by tribals. Some of them were Christians, actually. But the story stuck, So my paper, which Catholic paper, was, honest enough to publish it. But in India, it stuck. And even today, if you speak about the Jabwa rapes, it is thought that it was done by Hindus. So I'm not saying that, the media did it on purpose, but they just picked up the story. And journalists today, they don't have time, so they tend to write fast, they tend not to verify, they tend not to put things in perspective. And that is, that is the fault. And the other thing I can say quickly is that I am against this tendency to demonize politicians, because politicians are elected by the people, they reflect the people. I'm not saying they're good, I know there's corruption in India, but people are good in this country, Even politicians, they just work in a system which is wrong, Mr. Nehru, bless his soul, set up a system which was okay for the British, because they were few and they didn't need to be corrupt. But a system where politicians, they have so much power, and often they're not, educated, and, there's so much pressure on them, So the system is wrong, but the people of India are good, this House of Cards, I don't know how many of you see the House of Cards, it's wrong. It has demonized politics, People are good. We need to think that people are good, and they do make mistakes. Thank you.
But on the specific part which Srini said, Srini made, according to me, Srini made a assertion which says that fake news is bad. A lot of people do it, but it's especially bad when the government and the ruling party does it. So would you agree with that?
No, no, I don't agree. But he's a nice guy, so. I don't agree at all, because there are 80% Hindus here. There's 1 billion Hindus in the world. It's one of the most tolerant people in the world. Who accept that. But I'm not saying this to praise you. As a Frenchman, in a country where.
Yeah, but this is about the BJP and the ruling party, not about Hindus.
No, but the BJP is the party of the Hindus, and the Hindus need their own party. And I don't think they, on the contrary, Mr. Modi, who comes from a, quite a low class, he's totally uncorrupt guy, his brother, let me say, I may be wrong, but let me say it, his brother still works in the ration shop in Gujarat, his mother he's never used his power. So I may be wrong, but that's my opinion.
Okay. Mukund, look, Mukund, you're from Chennai. And if there's one thing which all of us in Bangalore respect Chennai for, is it's a calm, sober place.
Yeah,
would you sort of come in and add some perspective to this?
Well, I don't know about perspective, but I thought this was going to be a quiet, sober discussion. But I just, want to get remote. I'll just start with what Naresh said, and I think he made the important point that there is news that is false and news that is fake, and there must be an element of mens rea an intent to misinform, to deceive, and I think that basic definition should hold. I just have a small difference of opinion with Chitra. I completely understand where she comes from. She says good journalism will not intend to deceive, which I completely agree with. But is this a journalist problem as well? I mean, I think that's important because many of us come from, our journalists here. And I think it is for two reasons. I mean, take something like clickbait headlines. How pervasive they've become. Journalists write them. And I don't think there is enough of a debate to introspect and to ask whether such form of writing, and it's not just headlines, sometimes it gets into the form of the piece itself. I think we live in a world, and I, coming from a mainstream media where we're taught to verify and check and recheck before we publish something, I find myself in a position where in this world of instantaneous news, where everyone wants to be 1 nanosecond faster than somebody else. A TV channel wants to break news before someone else. A website wants to put something out before someone else. We are living in a world where this is also infecting, and this has infected our journalists. We look at something on Twitter, and the journalist can assume it's true. And there have been occasions when sometimes a piece of completely fake news has gotten into a newspaper. And then we regret it. So I think this is an ecosystem which is affecting all of us. Vasu might be right in that, in so much as when it comes from people in power, then it becomes a much more pervasive problem than people outside it. But this kind of misinformation that we see is coming from everywhere. It's coming, it's coming from within. I think it's also coming from without. I mean, a lot of the stuff that's happening in Kashmir, for instance, we know, is coming from videos which have no relation to Kashmir. Now, it's not clear where it's coming from. the government thinks that it's coming from Pakistan. I'm not affirming or denying this. But we see strife. We've seen, lynchings on child kidnappings. We've seen all that, and they seem to be coming from multiple sources. They may be coming from those in power. They seem to be coming from outside. They seem to be coming from random individuals. But we've all, as media people, been affected by this, and we've been victims of this, and I think that's a problem that we need to address.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do in the next set of conversations is take out this journalism thing out of this. Because what happens is, fake news is not a journalism problem. Fake news is a social problem. So fake news is a political problem which involves all of us, because all of us in a sense are journalists, because you could take a photograph, or you could take a smartphone and record a video and share it with a extremely different kind of a caption, or you could circulate a video which comes from somewhere else, as you said. But I just want to share with you the mechanism of what happens, right? There's theory behind this. This is this idea of information cascades. And the Duke University political information scientists who studied this came up with this problem. Okay, they try to answer this. There's this perception in the United States that all immigrants are criminals, right? Immigrants are generally criminals. Yet, every person they interviewed and asked them, do you know an immigrant? Yes. Do you think he's a criminal? No. So, very few people they actually interviewed in real life knew an immigrant who was a criminal. Yet, all of them felt that immigrants in general tend to be criminals, right? So, they tried to investigate why is this so. And what they found is they did this experiment where you have a bowl with 3 balls in it. 2 of the balls are red, 1 is blue. And in the other bowl, you have 2 blue balls and 1 red ball, right? So the bowl with red balls in majority is the red bowl, and the bowl with blue balls in the majority is the blue bowl. So what they made people do is they made them stand in a straight line and come and take 1 ball out of the given bowl, look at the color, and announce to the world what is the color of the bowl that was, right? So the first guy comes, let's say he picks up a red ball. He doesn't know anything else. He calls red. The second guy comes, he also picks up a red ball. He calls red. The third guy comes along. Let's say now he picks up the blue ball. What does he call? He doesn't call blue. He calls red, because 2 people ahead of him have called it red. The people behind him don't know what ball has been picked. So let's say the 4th guy comes, picks up a ball. It's blue. What does he call? Red. 5th guy comes, picks up a blue ball. What does he call? Red. So even if every other person comes and picks up a blue ball, he still calls red, because people ahead of him have called it red, right? So in a way the mind operates, this is called social proof, right? You don't believe based on what you saw or what you decided. You believe what other people around you believe, right? And I think the idea of social media, where we are all in our own happy echo chambers, believe what other people in our echo chamber believe, right? So in that sense, truth becomes a question of what other people believe, not what you saw and did, right? And of course, this theory goes on to say how you can break this. We'll keep this apart. But the reason I gave you this metaphor is to say that, look, in all of us here are capable of generating and propagating fake news. So it's not the journalists over here. So I don't want you guys to feel defensive about it, right? But you guys do have a role. The role is not to propagate that narrative, right? The buck has to stop at the door of a journalist who has massive power to do so. The other institution which can actually block fake news from spreading is government, because they can put out authoritative sources of fact. Now, I want to leave this point here and ask our commentators to comment between, who stops this, whether the government should be stopping it, whether it should be journalists, whether it should be individuals like us who have, let's say, 10,000 followers on Twitter. Is it our responsibility to follow? I mean, how does it go? Who's supposed to be fixing this problem? We won't start with Pratik. We'll probably start with Naresh again.
Yes, so the government seems to believe that there are technical solutions to stop fake news, and they recently asked the WhatsApp guys to stop forwards or limit the number of forwards. And in their attempt again to stop fake news from spreading, they often pull the plug on the internet. This year, up to the beginning of the month, the internet had been shut down 106 times in India.
And it seems to be the lowest hanging fruit for a
Right.
government, right?
But-
Every time you feel that there is some disturbance going on, you turn off the internet.
And but when some rumors are stifled, other rumors grow to take their place. And as Vasu pointed out, the problem is this is a government that propagates fake news itself. It produces graphs after diesel prices rise, but the bar on the graph is actually lower. It's an astonishing thing. It's a government that hates data. We don't have a central statistician anymore.
We do have one. No? We have a new guy.
Do we have one now?
A new guy has been
A
appointed.
new guy has been appointed. That was a bit of fake news. I retract immediately. But this is a government that's constantly changing the basis for how things are calculated in order to weigh things in their favor. So it's not clear that the government or this present dispensation has very much to do in our attempt to stop fake news. To my mind, the battle against fake news will have to be waged, and I still think as a journalist, by every individual publication, by every individual journalist. It will mean convincing readers of the credibility of our mastheads and our bylines. I think it's an endeavor that sort of takes great honesty. As Mukund points out, we have to resist the urge to oversell and exaggerate our stories and admit our errors when we're wrong. But in the end, I have no doubt we'll win, because if there's one thing in this business that we know in this business is that our readers and viewers are not idiots. And eventually we know that they'll recognize the conmen and the stoical statesmen, people who find Nostradamus predictions in their trunks and pull them out every few months. So yes, well, we have an intelligent electorate, an intelligent bunch of citizens, and they know the difference.
You want to come in? Okay, let Vasu take it and then you can.
Okay. Just to say, firstly, to Francois, who also seems like a perfectly reasonable person, that to criticize politicians is not to demonize them, and to criticize the BJP is not to be anti-Hindu. So let's sort of try to lift this discussion. Let's try to lift this discussion out of the sort of binaries, these sort of simplistic binaries we deal with on social media. Look, I'm concerned that this is turning into exactly the kind of conversation I think we should avoid, where we try to treat a phenomenon, a singularly disturbing phenomenon, in a kind of generic way, that this is everyone's problem. We're all responsible. It's social media, it's individuals, it's state, it's society. It doesn't quite work like that, right? So as I said at the outset, that the most egregious offenders, if that happens to be the government, the ruling party of the day, if it happens to be certain mainstream channels, then that is something that can seriously destabilize democracy more than what you and I sitting on our Twitter handles or sending WhatsApp forwards can. Obviously, we are also stakeholders, but let's address where the real problem is. Let's speak truth to power, and only then can you actually address change. Now, the problem with where we are is there are no consequences either for political parties or for mainstream media outlets that have mainstreamed falsehoods in any way, right? If the gatekeepers themselves, if Amit Shah is going to put out false propaganda, if Rahul Gandhi is going to repeat falsehoods, if mainstream news channels are going to take WhatsApp forwards and turn them into nightly shows without any punishment, without any consequences, this cycle will continue. So what's the solution? The solution is simply one: if any of these political parties were to simply reprimand, punish, expel even one person who speaks a falsehood or speaks a lie, just imagine the effect it will have. Or if a channel apologizes or suspends an anchor or puts out an apology or a retraction, imagine the effect it will have. That's not happening. So the only choice left for us as a people is ultimately to exercise. There are two options we have, right? One is the court of public opinion, because what do politicians care about? They care about votes. So if you indicate to them politically that you do not stand for this kind of falsehoods and propaganda, using the power of the democratic process, that's one way of checking it. The other is to actually go to court, because we have very strong laws against hate speech. I'm not someone in favor of moving, taking the defamation route. But there are other laws available for particularly egregious examples of divisive falsehoods, which can be challenged in court. And I just want to clarify at the end, before I pass to Chitra, that, again, remember, Nitin, I'm not talking about fake news in the WhatsApp, social media definitional sense alone. Because a large chunk of this country is offline, right? So I'm talking about falsehoods that take the form of political propaganda, of speeches, of statements, of policies, which go much beyond the social media ecosystem. So let's just keep that perspective in mind.
Chitra.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just, this whole notion about India being violent or one political party being more divisive than the other. I have lived through what the Congress tried to do with me during Bofors, and it was for 10 years. And Srini would say yes, and then we can go back and forth. But they actually tried to spread falsehoods about my family and my husband and everybody. That time there was no internet, so people didn't read. There were newspapers. Thank God for that, because I would be jumping out of my window every day. But let's be clear, we're constantly calling the fringe, the fringe, the fringe. Well, let me just tell you that we are the fringe. The people, we are the fringe, because India doesn't think like us. And many of us are not in touch with the real India. I don't know which politician is, by the way. I'm not saying one politician is or the other one is not. But this definition of they are the fringe, we are the fringe, at the end of the day, it will come down to who votes. That's it. Secondly, to your point about how to regulate this, I don't think we should regulate this. This is not something for regulation. This will get regulated. Social media will start regulating itself because, as it was pointed out, people are not idiots. They will figure out sooner or later. And I think journalists, all of us, have to earn the right to lead. We have to earn the right to be read. We have to earn the right to be heard. You cannot just go blabbering every day. People will come to you once or twice. But, never underestimate the power of somebody. There will always be somebody in the audience who will call you out. And you will have to live with that.
Francois, do you want to add anything? Yeah.
I think we flipped around the problem because, instead of looking at journalism who's at fault in fake news, now we're looking at politicians. But actually, my perception is that in India, people have a very low opinion about their own journalists, and in the world in general. So we should look at journalism in India, and not at politicians. The fake news it's mostly made by journalists, And let's face it, journalism today, whether it is in the West or in India, it's left-leaning. There's nothing wrong in left-leaning, but it's left-leaning. So it's got a very heavy slant. A very heavy slant. Let me say what I think. After all, I'm a foreigner. I'm a Catholic-born guy. So
that doesn't matter.
I mean,
in Bangalore,
most people. Let me say that most people repeat what their parents have said. Most people have brilliant reproductions of their atavism, of what they have seen, what they have read, what they have heard from their parents, their teachers. So they just reproduce that. I came from a different background. Whatever opinion I have, right or wrong, I made them on my own. I made them on my own here because I've come from a different background. I didn't know what was a Hindu. I didn't know what was a Muslim. I didn't know what was a Christian Indian. I had no clue. I came here when I was 19. I had no clue. So whatever opinions I made them on my own. And most people repeat opinions that they heard second-hand. And the work of a journalist is to repeat opinions first-hand. And it's not done in India. I'm sorry, it's not done. Even on Kashmir, you look at Kashmir, I covered Kashmir, when 400,000 Hindus were chased out, innocent people. They never did anything, never touched anybody. They didn't even fire a shot in defense, and they all fled like cattle, I was there. Now today Kashmir is made as if they're all martyrs, Every Kashmiri Muslim is a martyr. It's not true. It's a war started in the name of Islam. Now if you say it, people will say you're Islamophobe, but that's what I saw. That's what I saw, and this is the truth. And this has become fake news. This is fake news.
Okay, so anyway, I think this was a little a digression. Pratik, I want to come to you. See, what I want to ask you is this. I think the journalists here said that people are not idiots, right? People are not fools, people are not idiots. But just like how you can't hypnotize a person against that person's will, can you persuade a person about fake news which the person does not already want to believe in? In other words, is the fake news thing playing to the prejudices which people have rather than it's just arbitrarily any piece of news?
So firstly, I have a grouse with everybody on this panel.
Fantastic.
So because everybody, in last in 4 or 5 months, here it seems that people think that what goes on WhatsApp and Facebook doesn't matter. But there are 30 people who have been killed because exactly of what went on WhatsApp and Twitter. And a lot of these people were offline. They were not online. They got together and they lynched people just because they thought that child kidnappers are on the prowl and they are going to kidnap their children and sell their organs. So, to assume that WhatsApp and Facebook is not having an effect is completely wrong assumption. Otherwise, Amit Shah wouldn't have been making that speech. Amit Shah wouldn't have been making a speech. They wouldn't have been creating these WhatsApp armies unless they knew that it affects people. And when something goes viral, for example, I'll give you a simple example. And so I met Barkha in some conference, and so she told me that she went to some conference, and they're like, "Where's your husband?" Because on Twitter, it is claimed that she has 3 husbands, right? So and this, you'll find tens of tweets which says she has 3 husbands. So it is not that people do not believe. And even if people are offline, there is also, let's say if you're in a rural area, if few people have smartphones and they get the information, it is not that the information stops there. In rural areas, there's a much more communal thing where people talk to each other, and people will speak about the things that they know, and it is usually the more influential people in rural area who can afford a smartphone, and their word matters. So if they say that this is what has come on WhatsApp and that this is what is happening, then their word would matter. So I think we are downplaying the effect of social media, we are downplaying the effect of WhatsApp, and that is where a lot of propaganda is. And another thing is that, so multiple conferences that I've gone, I've been told this again and again, that we do good journalism, But what about the people who think that Imtiaz Ali was the one who drove the train over those 60 people? Don't these people need to be informed that it was not Imtiaz Ali? Because there is a concerted propaganda going on. But there'll be only 1 or 2 websites, and we reach about, 40,000-50,000 people. We don't reach those people who are getting affected by this propaganda.
Pratik, that's the reason I asked you this. Because with due apologies to Barkha, who might be here, we are discussing her personal life. People believe that, people spread the news that she has 3 husbands when they want to believe that she has husbands. People who don't have a stake in it don't do that. No, let me ask you another one. Yeah, you sure?
I think, Pratik, in a sense, you're addressing what I said, and I just wanted to clarify something, that it's not that I'm necessarily downplaying the impact of social media as a platform that carries these falsehoods. But I'm concerned about who is creating these falsehoods. What is the agenda behind it? These are not just simply bubbling up out of nowhere. Now, when you speak of just a second, when you speak of the rumors about child abduction and the murders that happened, that was something we took very seriously and we reported it. That was truly a kind of depoliticized, agenda-less falsehoods. But surely the amount of time you spend debunking communal, divisive, politically driven falsehoods. So my concern is looking at the levers of power as to where that is coming from, what is the motivation behind it. And unless we call that out, you're literally going to be just mopping the floor where the tap is on. So that was really where I was coming from.
Let me finish, Pratik. See, what I was saying is, much as I agree with what Srini says that people who have power should be held highly responsible, whatever they do, including on the business of information. But here's the thing: when there's a tweet by a particular person which is fake news, it gets a lot of retweets. When that person clarifies, the number of retweets is always smaller. There's something at work here. It's not just. Of course, the government or whoever's the malicious person is trying to spread malice through WhatsApp, through fake news, through social media. But aren't the people also susceptible to this? Are people more susceptible to certain types of fake news than other types of fake news?
Yes. So, we spoke about clickbait headlines. It is all, anything that triggers you and you're susceptible to that. So, a lot of this information is essentially trying to trigger you. And there is confirmation bias, and there are images of, for example, Narendra Modi and Hafiz Saeed shaking hands that goes viral when it cannot happen. But there is a confirmation bias, and people will share such images. So that is the truth, and that is where I think training comes into picture, where you have to be trained how to pursue information. And that is a larger question than just journalism.
Mukund, if I were to ask you a non-journalist, as a journalist, I think you guys have all said your piece. Okay, journalists are important in this. They have an important role to hold the government to power and spike fake news whenever they see it. But as a member of society, do you think, other than journalists, there are other people who have responsibility to stop this or do something about this?
So I have to answer this as a non-journalist. Okay, that's it. I agree with Pratik that the damage. I think WhatsApp is the biggest vector of fake news, and the most horrific things have happened in this country as a result of this. I don't think we should downplay child kidnappings. I don't think we should do something. What as a citizenry we should do about it is a hard one, because people are believing that something is happening. I think the people who killed those people genuinely believe that they were child. I don't think the answer is the government involvement. I don't think technical solutions will make the fix. Frankly, this is a problem that just has to come with a great deal of awareness that not everything you see is necessarily true. I've had fake news WhatsApp to me by extremely eminent journalists. And when I've pointed this out, saying this looks like a piece of fake news, the answer is, but another senior journalist sent it to me. So we're all victims of this. And it affects, it doesn't affect just the ignorant, it also sometimes misleads the intelligent, I think, and the informed. If I may be permitted to say something in my role as a journalist, not necessarily as a citizen, I just think we need to, in the traditional media, address this very issue that he said, that you pointed out, and I think Pratik agreed to, that the damage done by something that is false, even if it's not necessarily fake, because I think we should make this difference between false and fake, even if it's false, is sometimes greater than any effort you take to redress it. And I'm not sure if a redressal is enough in saying, thank you, I've put out a correction, or I've amended my report, I've just pulled the false still or the false slide from a TV show, or not repeated the same thing again. I think as a journalist community, we must learn a little more to apologize for the mistakes we made. And I don't think we do it enough. And I think it's a damn good thing to apologize, because if you find an apology from, nothing shames the reporter who's got something wrong, or done something in haste, or not verified his facts, or fallen for a piece of fake news, than an apology from the top. Because that sends the signal that this organization cares about making mistakes. And I think the processes that we have generally as a media are not strong enough for that. So we perpetuate this sometimes, and I think that is a problem. So I'm, the last bit was as a journalist, not necessarily
Sure,
a
thanks.
citizen. Yeah.
I think it's time to bring all of us, journalists, non-journalists, and everybody into the conversation. So please raise your hands. Keep your questions small and short so that we can have a lot more people speaking and responding. The person with the blue shirt was the person I noticed first. No, I saw the guy with the blue shirt right here. Yeah, you can.
Okay, now the question is about primarily related to this discussion, sir. It is related to the institutionalization of fake news that's been happening today.
I think let's just to be fair to the rest, I think just wait, just get the mic. Can someone pass a mic to the gentleman here with the blue shirt? Okay. Can I just pass this? Why don't you take this? Come.
Okay, this is regarding the discussion that happened earlier regarding the institutionalization.
On this panel, right?
Yeah,
the discussion on this panel.
Of course.
Okay.
It was regarding the institutionalization of fake news that's been happening today. I mean, earlier it was only about certain individuals, but now there's a backing from a higher level as well. We know what happened in the past. We know what happened in Germany. We know. I can give you an example.
Yeah, keep it fast.
Yeah, sure. A
Come
French
to your question
example.
quickly.
We have Marine Le Pen, whose father who is a very, is very famous for his Holocaust denials. I think so. Shouldn't we reflect on what happened to our past and use it as an example for today? What might happen in the future as well?
Well, I think I'll answer that on behalf of the panel. The answer is yes, we must reflect on the past. Let's get to some other question. This lady here had the first question here.
Because we are sitting with so many journalists today.
Can we get the mic here? One mic. Yeah. Yes, please continue.
So my question is, when we were talking about fake news being perpetrated from the topmost end, people who are in power, that is not just happening in India. When we see Jamal Khashoggi is murdered and Trump says, oh, there might be rogue killers. Or you see two Reuters journalists are incarcerated for over a year and Madam Suki says that no, they were threatening national integrity. Now when fake news is coming from that kind of source, and then the country gets divided into two parts. One half is absolutely ready to believe them. The other half says, no, it doesn't happen. You get caught in binaries there. So not as journalists, but as citizens, how do you speak truth to power there?
Chitra got a hand up.
I think it's a very good question, and I think it's a very important question, and this is where I think the social media will come in as a watchdog. What we see now, there are obvious problems with it, this WhatsApp journalism. It's young, but as it matures, there are good sides of social media as well. And if you start looking at some handles, they actually call out the rubbish, either by Trump or anybody else. So the social media will, I think, be a watchdog. The other point I quickly want to make is the assumption India has always been a very violent country. I was born in Bihar. I grew up in Bihar. Let me tell you, the kind of violence I saw when I was little is nothing compared to what's going on now. I mean, to say that suddenly India has become violent is to me, being a little not appreciating the situation. What is the solution? In my view, it's education and jobs. Education and jobs. And all governments have failed to do this. All of them.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I'm Nishka Ratnam, and I'm not supposed to exist. And my mother, who is dead, is supposed to be alive and is supposed to be posing around on the net with very famous film stars. Now, if that isn't fake, whatever, I really don't know what it is. I mean, I have people not allowing me to offer mass for the soul of my parents because they're supposed to be alive according to the net. And I'm not supposed to be able to offer mass because I'm not supposed to exist according to the net. My question really, and I have people coming telling me, oh, I see this is a case of fake news. No, when will you draw the difference between what is fake news and what is just fake information?
Who wants to take this? Yeah. The mic is, I think, Pratik, let me just sort of rephrase this question for you to make it more containable to answer. Is there a difference between fake information that exists around in the ether out there and specifically manufactured fake news which is vectorized for certain purposes? Like, for example, people believe that the Americans didn't go to space, the moon mission was a fake, and there were UFOs and all that, which keeps going round and round. Or you have specific information saying that this particular immigrant somewhere was a criminal and therefore needs to be killed or things like that.
I still don't get the question.
Okay. So I think we'll just move on to somebody else. The person in the yellow shirt there. Yes, sir.
Hi, my question is for the French gentleman.
For the?
French gentleman.
French gentleman.
In your opinion, is the allegation as far as of corruption in the Rafale deal, is it fake news or not?
No, I'm not an expert on Rafale just because I'm French. You know, Rafale means a strong wind, actually. You know, it's supposed to be the best fighter plane in the world. That's all I know. I can't say, you know, they were started by a French journalist in Delhi, actually, the Le Monde correspondent. But there were a lot of counter views which have been floated and interviews of the president. So I can't really say. But no, I don't think it's fake news. If you want a straight answer, I don't think it's fake news. I think there are diverse opinions, and it's probably, you know, I have visited Hindustan Aeronautics many years ago, and I don't think they're capable of assembling the Rafale. And they have a point in Paris. I don't think so. probably the Ambanis are more capable and they have more resources.
Well, as a Bangalorean, I would strongly protest. HAL is very important to us. You can make any plane you want.
Let me say again, you know that.
Let's go on.
Just one word, you know. HAS has done for 30 years. They tried to produce a fighter plane called the Tejas. It's still not flying. You know, it's not commercialized.
I think I've got to come in and say, okay, this
I just want to make a point.
Let's not get into defense.
I just want to talk about journalism on the Khafal deal. There was a gentleman who was very highly placed, I think senior VP of communications of Dassault, who actually had the audacity to say that Indian journalists are good. I think there's a lot of patronizing going on about, we are good journalists. I mean, there are excellent journalists in India. And then the gentleman asks me to delete my tweet. I wouldn't do that. Why on earth would I delete a tweet? Because I told him that stop being patronizing about India. We are good, we are bad. We are no better than others. We make our mistakes and we learn and we go on. End of story.
Being able to self-regulate as a media. We have various platforms that are meant to self-regulate because obviously none of us would want the government to get involved. But that's largely not worked out for reasons that perhaps we don't have enough time to get into here. So you're right that paid news remains an endemic chronic problem. It's something that various fora like the Editors Guild and so on has tried to tackle. In fact, a sort of an investigative report into paid news was commissioned a while back and that report got buried. So I think the absence of regulation both within TV and print, and now, you know, digital media is also spreading, goes back to what I said, that you can have paid news, you can spread falsehoods, and there are no consequences for you. So I think that unless we manage to strengthen and, you know, create mechanisms of self-regulation, I don't know which country in the world has solved this problem, but unless we do that, this rot in the media is only going to get worse.
You know, as a believer in free market economics, this panel tells you that even if they fail in that self-regulation, you will have new players coming in. Scroll comes up all out of nowhere. It's one of the biggest news platforms in the country today. It came out of nowhere. It's what? How many years old is it, Naresh? So can you tell us why Scroll is successful in this context?
Well, I think it's, like I said...
And Scroll and people like you.
It's a question of we had no legacy and we had to build trust and credibility. There were no assumptions that were that accrued to us. And yes, that's what I said. You have to build credibility story by story, byline by byline. It's a slow, painful process. In the digital age, it can sometimes be accelerated.
You guys are doing paid news of a different kind, right? You're asking us to pay for the news. So
please do. Thank you for that appeal.
How's that working out? Is that a model which can actually tackle...
well, it's worked in many other places. It's working in India slowly. Here you have, in Bangalore, you have the example of the Ken, which is almost entirely funded by subscriptions. And I think in the new world, journalism will be funded from a variety of sources, like newspapers were, by subscriptions, which was a smaller percentage for newspapers, and by advertising. But it will have to be a combination of the two things.
And this, yeah. Sir, the person over here. I think I'm going to too many sirs. I need to go to some madams as well.
Forget about fake news. Where is fair reporting? Where is the truth reported that in Kerala, 5,000 cases have been filed and 2,000 people have been arrested? Where is emergency in Kerala now reported? Nobody is reporting the truth. This is Rothschild media, which is purporting India in a different sense. Can you tell the truth what is happening in Kerala? Why there is emergency in Kerala?
Vasu, can you? Answer him.
You clearly have got this information from reading it in the media. So I don't understand how you can turn around and argue it's not being reported in the media.
Okay. Can I have some... No, I'm only going to recognize ladies for the next 2 rounds. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks very much. So as somebody who works in this area, fuck. Whoops.
We didn't hear that.
No, censored. So I think the big thing that we lack is money towards research and funding on this alone. So two things that have come that we've been working on. One is WhatsApp misinformation, and one is the way that people read images. So very recently, when the Google Me Too Shining India, unfortunately, image went viral, some of us looked at it really closely, and it was completely hogwash. Okay, that, you know, when you went to the first page, when you went to the Google Trends page, it had those towns. You zoom in on those towns, that is not data, that is real. At least 5 data visualization experts and myself have confirmed this. As Pratik said earlier today, if you zoom in onto the image, you notice the gaps. So I think one thing that we need to be thinking a lot more about is image literacy and video literacy, because it's not only about written, and in this country, definitely not. And secondly, the problem is that we don't have funding for this kind of research. So hilariously, WhatsApp commissioned this misinformation grant, whatever, because the government said that it was WhatsApp's problem and not their own. But we need to have other bodies funding this kind of research so that we can put it out there, so that people take the words of specialists, because as this panel has demonstrated, nobody really wants to take responsibility for it, and people still listen to
I will get Pratik to take responsibility for this question. Pratik, you guys are doing this business of noticing and spiking fake news. What do you do to, I mean, how do you train yourselves first? How do you train yourselves and your people who work for you, the hundreds or thousands of people who work for you? And also, what do you do to educate the rest of us how to spot this?
So firstly, the question is very important, and there needs to be education in, because, you know, where most of the misinformation is in the form of images with a line of text or video with a line of text. And what the images and videos does is that it makes it visual. And so, for example, a video which says that, you know, somebody who's from the Muslim community has killed somebody from the Hindu community, and you can see somebody getting killed. Now, you don't know whether who is Muslim, who's Hindu, but because of the leading text and the visual nature of this thing, it seems real. And that is why most of the misinformation is in that form. And the way we do it, we use various techniques. I don't think there's enough time to sort of go into that, but it is absolutely necessary that, you know, and that is what I was trying to sort of say earlier, that the solution is not just in journalism. The solution also has to be in education as to how do you figure out, you know, whether this image is true or not.
Are there techniques that you can teach? That's what I wanted to know.
Yes. So for example, last month we did a 5-day training with Google, 40 Hindi language journalists, and the month before that we did another 5-day training with 40 English language journalists. So it is not rocket science. It is quite easy to do what we do, actually.
So in that sense, journalists are the front line of defense against fake news?
Sorry, Pratik, by the way, has a whole series of YouTube tutorials on spotting and identifying fake news, which is really worth checking out. But I just want to make a slightly facetious, low-tech way of trying to curb fake news, which is, what is up with Indians and WhatsApp forwards, right? Can we just stop forwarding relentlessly as a starting point? I mean, this is something which I have to speak, you know, from a slightly
we are a very sharing community.
From a slightly personal pain point of view, I think that's just like one simple solution. Also, there's another low-tech example of this IPS officer called Rema Rajeshwari in Telangana, who went out and, again, to the point Pratik was making about the fake news about child abductions, and she launched this campaign in her district, which I think is a predominantly rural district, took out street plays, you know, used cultural tropes, had loudspeakers, and did an astonishing job of actually trying to contain fake news. So there you have one IPS officer isolated in a district who's actually managing to turn things around. And then, you know, you have a political establishment, instead of taking that example and trying to sort of turn it into a national movement, unfortunately becoming, you know, a sort of a source of fake news.
Ma'am.
One thing I want to add about, you know, I am extremely skeptical about fact-checking websites. And sorry to say this in your presence, because there's one called Boom, and it claims to be a fact-checker. And the managing editor of that site tweeted saying that Chitra discovered the value of the Bofors gun when we won the Kargil war. So I told this online, show me one piece of information in everything I have written that can actually prove what you have said. I'm still waiting. However, in the meantime, I'm getting delegations, messages telling me, we want to interview you, we think you're really very good. So I don't even trust fact checkers because I do my own fact checking, and that's how I work with my team.
I think that's a good, I mean, you can't make an opinion on fact-checking websites based on one piece of information, but not trusting the fact-checking website is a very good skill. I think Pratik will agree with that. You would expect people not to agree with your alt news site, but make their own minds up?
Definitely. So that is what the larger purpose is, that more and more people start doing this individually. At least most of the information that comes on WhatsApp can be traced. You go to Google, images.google.com, there's a small camera icon, click on that, upload the image, figure out where the image originates from, use the time filter. So a lot of these things can be learned in the space of 48 hours. And that is the larger vision, that people should be able to look at images and videos and figure out, where it originated from. And, so yes, absolutely.
None of you have any idea about the regional media. If you had known anything about the Kannada media, you would be speaking in a different language altogether. This fake news, the threatening, and Me Too, for example, what they did with Shruti Hariharan. None of this, what you have said, applies to Kannada media. It's a war zone.
Okay, it's a comment now. Kannadadalle next ಮಾತಾಡೋಣ ಬೇರೆ language
ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಕನ್ನಡ media, the way the fake news, threatening news, paid news, and wrong interpretations. It is so serious the way the media is handling news and people. What happened to Shruti Hariharan for Me Too? The Kannada people don't understand Me Too. I wrote about it, and even my writing, my response to that itself was misinterpreted because they don't understand this. So the difference between English media and the regional language media is so vast. The gap is so wide. You can't generalize.
Why don't you take that? Because I think Vasu here has, in fact, that's what I felt also, but I think I'm not supposed to answer.
Ma'am, the unfortunate news is that you're right that perhaps, those of us in the national media don't fully understand what's happening in the regional media. But I want to tell you that it's as bad when it comes to the mainstream media. Okay, we have exactly what you're talking about. You have falsehoods, you have fakery, you have, the production of completely divisive, bigoted news, government propaganda, all of that. This is a malaise that unfortunately has infected all sections of media, national, regional, the works.
Okay. We have time. Only, these guys are going to pull out the plugs right now. So, sir, you can take the question and then we'll...
I'd like to point out couple of pieces of fake news that's come from the panel here.
Okay.
And I'm expressly...
We have an alt news in the audience.
Expressly addressing Monsieur Gautier. He said that the Tejas hasn't flown. The reason it was called the Tejas was Mr. Vajpayee named it the Tejas when he saw it flying after the 10th time. The second thing is, as far as the Rafale is concerned, he obviously doesn't know that part of the agreement with, the original agreement with Hindustan Aircraft was to transfer technology because they knew that Hindustan Aircraft doesn't have the technology to build a Rafale. Transfer of technology was an essential, important part of the deal. Now, to say that Hindustan Aircraft can't do it, yes, Hindustan Aircraft is building aircraft with 50-year-old technology. So, to say that, either it is ignorance or because Le Figaro is so right-wing that it can't see anything else.
Yeah. So we got the point. So one more question. So it's good that the audience can do fact check, and that's what I was telling him. Don't come to Bangalore and run down HAL. You will find somebody out there who will point something up. Come. Yeah, ma'am. Last one. You get to ask the best question of the evening.
Have you noticed that all the fake news comes from men? What women are accused of faking is far less criminal than what you guys are accused of faking. So stop faking.
On that brilliant note, I think we should just stop it. We need a good round of applause for the lady here. Thanks a lot to the panelists. You are a great audience. Enjoy the rest of the Bangalore Lit Fest.